Commercial capital. This is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Amarachi Ubani.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight, federal government announces third coronavirus case in Nigeria. A 30-year-old UK returnee is said to be stable and already taken into quarantine in Lagos. Federal government bans government officials from embarking on foreign trips, orders Nigerians returning to the country to go on self-isolation for 14 days. The House of Representatives asked federal government to immediately cut in half all flights from COVID-19 high-risk countries as Senate recommends review of 2020 budget. And European Union to ban travellers from outside the bloc for 30 days in an unprecedented move to seal its borders amid the coronavirus crisis. Plus business, sports, and news from Abuja, the FCT, and later news from our London studios.
On business news tonight, President Muhammadu Buhari assures Nigerians that the federal government will explore all alternatives to protect citizens from the economic impact of COVID-19.
And on sports news tonight, the coronavirus pandemic claims more sporting events after the postponement of the National Sports Festival, Euro 2020 and the French Open.
And from Abuja, Supreme Court reserves ruling in APC's application, asking it to set aside order which made the People's Democratic Party PDP beneficiary of all elective positions in the 2019 general election in Zamfara State.
Today it became clear that Nigeria has no option but to double and intensify surveillance following the confirmation of a third case of the novel coronavirus in Lagos. The latest case is a 30-year-old Nigerian female who returned to Nigeria from the UK on March 13th. The Minister of Health, Dr. Osage Hanire, says the lady immediately embarked on self-isolation before developing the COVID-19 symptoms and tested positive thereafter. He explains that contact tracing is ongoing and he's hopeful they would have few persons quarantined because the patient went into self-isolation as soon as she returned. He adds that the new case is independent of the index case.
We have a new case which the stringent surveillance efforts of the Federal Ministry of Health have identified of this new case of a coronavirus disease within our borders, which now brings the total number of confirmed cases Nigeria has ever seen to 3. The latest case is a Nigerian national in her 30s who returned from a brief visit to the United Kingdom on the 13th of March. Fortunately, she heeded all the advisory we have given and decided upon returning home to go into a 14-day self-isolation. But subsequently, she developed symptoms of fever and cough and reported on the 16th of March, at which point she voluntarily called the Nigeria Center for Disease Control hotline to report her condition. Officials from Lagos State Emergency Operations Center were immediately dispatched to her home to collect samples, which upon testing came out positive for coronavirus. The lady is currently at the Infectious Disease Hospital in Yaba, where she has remained clinically stable and is responding to treatment.
More details are emerging on the third case of the virus in Nigeria. The Lagos State Commissioner for Health, Professor Akin Abayomi, says the patient's siblings have also been isolated at the mainland infectious disease hospital in Yaba. 3 other suspected cases are in isolation because of their travel history, and he's appealing to Lagos residents not to panic as the situation is under control.
We've started the contact tracing process. Thankfully, she obeyed the instructions and she confined herself to her home, where she's only been in contact with her immediate family. That helps us tremendously because it limits our contact tracing to the manifest of the flight, which is BA75, that arrived on the 13th of March. We will be reaching out to every member, every passenger on that flight, as we did with the index case. But while we're making this a public announcement, anybody who was on that flight as a passenger, please feel free to reach out to any of the emergency numbers that I have given you. Those numbers are in the public domain. And we have a toll-free number, which is 08000 Corona. She lived with her parents and one sibling, and we have transferred her entire family to the infectious disease hospital in Yaba, where we have a family suite, and we're going to put the entire family of contacts. She is in a different ward, but her contacts are in a family suite, well separated from each other though, and we'll be monitoring them and performing tests on them.
A firm decision is required now more than ever from authorities on how to avoid a fresh import of the coronavirus and contain its spread. That perhaps explains why the federal government has stopped all government officials from embarking on foreign trips to at least for now. The directive from the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, also asked Nigerians coming in from outside the country to self-isolate themselves for 14 days. Mr. Mustafa gave the directive after the inaugural meeting of the Presidential Task Force team on COVID-19 in Abuja. Dr. Sania Liu is also named the National Coordinator of the Presidential Task Force on the Coronavirus, while the SGF is the chairman.
After due consideration and the trend of the spread of the novel coronavirus disease, COVID-19, and the subsequent declaration of the outbreak as pandemic by the World Health Organization, the committee has consequently decided to urge that we upscale our health emergency system to the highest level and put in measures to curb further spread of the disease. On the part of government, it has become necessary to advise all public officials in the ministries, departments, and agencies, including parastatals, that government has banned all forms of travels out of the country for whatever reason, whether for meetings, bilateral, multilateral, conferences, seminars, workshops, presentations, negotiations, and any form of other ceremonies. This ban will remain in place until further notice and until the situation of the pandemic nature of the coronavirus abates. With regards to the general public, we want to advise strongly that citizens in their own interests should cancel or postpone all non-essential travel abroad, including business and vacation trips. This is especially so, especially when it comes to travels to countries known to be seriously affected by COVID-19. And such high-risk countries are China, Iran, South Korea, Germany, Italy, USA, UK, Switzerland, Norway, Netherlands, Spain, France, and Japan. Secondly, we urge everyone returning to Nigeria from any country at all to strictly self-isolate for 14 days in their homes. Third, all people returning from countries with high community transmission rate, especially countries that have recorded 1,000 cumulative cases and above will be actively followed up for 14 days by the health authorities.
Meanwhile, before the directive from the federal government banning government officials from traveling abroad, members of the House of Representatives had suggested to the federal government to immediately cut in half all flights from high-risk countries, especially the UK, Spain, Italy, the US, China, and South Korea, except for Nigerian citizens who will be tested on arrival and may be quarantined if necessary. It's part of resolutions of the House following a motion on the need for extra measures against the coronavirus. The matter was raised as a motion of urgent public importance by Representative Onofiok Luke, who raised concerns over the new case of COVID-19 in the country.
The House further appreciates the seriousness of the current global epidemic, coronavirus, which the World Health Organization has branded a global pandemic that has so far affected almost 200,000 persons worldwide and killed over 7,000 in over 60 nations. In the United States, only the state of West Virginia is yet to report a case of coronavirus. Urge the federal government and the Federal Ministry of Aviation and security agencies to immediately halve all flights from high-risk countries, especially the UK, Spain, Italy, and the US, China, and South Korea, except for Nigerian citizens who will be tested on arrival and may be quarantined if necessary. Thirdly, the House urged the Federal Ministry of Health to continue to work with the federal and state medical establishment to update and upgrade facilities and prepare for eventuality.
For the Senate, the recommendation of its joint committee is for the federal government to reduce the 2020 budget in response to the current economic realities caused by the coronavirus. The Senate committee notes that the modalities to be adopted in reducing the budget should be agreed by the National Assembly and the Executive. Our correspondent, Linda Akigbe, reports.
On March 10th, the Senate assigned a joint committee the task of looking into the current economic challenges caused by the sharp drop of oil prices because of coronavirus and exacerbated by the price disagreement between Russia and Saudi Arabia.
Order 52 is seeking the indulgence
The chairman of the Committee on Finance is presenting the preliminary report on the urgent steps to take to handle the crisis.
The downsizing of the Appropriation Act as passed by the National Assembly is inevitable, but the modalities to be adopted in the reduction of the budget must be used as suggested by the Appropriation Chairman and agreed to by the Joint Committee. 3, that the Revenue Generating Agency must be alive to their responsibility in line with the Fiscal Responsibility Act passed by the National Assembly and other relevant laws of the National Assembly. That the Joint Committee will invite the relevant stakeholders to an interactive section. These stakeholders include the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Nigerian Petroleum Corporation, the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, and engage relevant stakeholders in the business community for their own input and suggestion on the way forward on a continuous basis.
They're also concerned about Nigeria's high cost of oil production.
The issue is that the inefficiencies within our own petroleum sector is what has raised the cost of production to that level. So this inefficiency can only be addressed if this Senate engages with the Ministry of Petroleum Resources so that we can really get the PIB and really look at the content of what it takes to get a barrel out of oil and then really peg it and make it low.
The Joint Committee is expected to continue to discuss with the Executive on a regular basis and come up with a final report on how to handle the current economic challenges. Meanwhile, a couple of constitution amendment bills are progressing in the legislative journey in the Senate. They are a bill to amend the Constitution to define who is an indigene of a state, a constitutional bill to enable women be identified as indigenes of a state by virtue of marriage when running for office, a bill to make provisions for independent candidates in elections.
There are certain persons that you need to sit down with.
Another bill which scaled second reading is a bill to amend the Child Rights Act to provide for a person convicted of attempted rape to be unsuitable to work with children. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
In part two after the break, we'll continue with the spotlight on the latest case of coronavirus in Nigeria. We'll be joined by our correspondent, Chris Lems, who is at the isolation center in Yaba, Lagos.